we're going to start Shark Tuner again, and let's kill the motor. We're going to do a file new, basically load a new program. This is an S4 for both the LH, one program for all. That's the fuel, the fuel processor. Turn ignition on as directed, but do not start the car. Wait for it to load. Okay, and now go back to the fuel menu, and we want to select new again, and this time we'll select EZK for an S4. Standard MAF, click OK. Ignition was still on, so we're instructed to turn it off. Takes a few seconds for the ECUs to power down, so we wait until Shark Tuner says ignition on. Turn the key back on, do not start, and let it finish loading. So now we've got a standard setup loaded into our PEMs for both the LH and the EZK. Default maps, standard settings. And we want to go back through all of these guys and just do a few checks. Fuel cutoff, RPM default for S4s is 6510. If this were GT, we'd want to maybe raise that a little bit. I'm not sure personally. Injector size, stock 19. Injector opening time is the latency or the dead time for the injectors. In other words, if you give it a 3 millisecond pulse, the first 0.94 milliseconds is spent getting the injectors open before any fuel starts flowing. The LH will cut the injection rate in half above 5100. That's done on the factory setup because the 19-pound injectors run out of open time at high RPM. Pulses just come too close together. And the cranking width for a warm engine is 4.2 milliseconds. Again, that's the stock injector number. Notice that's milliseconds. If you have larger injectors, you will want to reduce that time. And down here in the corner is a troublesome little setting called CO pot in non-cat mode. If we select the non-cat, we don't have a CO pot on this car. It's an American spec with a narrowband sensor. CO pots are used to adjust fuel for the Euro models with no sensor. So we always want to disable that. Just in case we ever do select the no-cat map, there won't be a CO pot there to help us out. Flappy, that's the default settings, rarely changed unless you've got a particularly non-standard application. O2 sensor, obey coding plug means to use the cat map because this is a US spec car. Oxygen sensor adaptation is how the LH adapts itself to aging maps and things that might shift the fuel mixture over time. In response to what the narrowband sensor feeds back, the LH will save the average amount of error, the enrichment or reduction in fuel over time, as an adaptation parameter. For tuning, we want to disable that, and we want to reset any stored values. So just click disable, click the reset button. And that's important for tuning. Otherwise, you've got the LH putting in an unknown amount of fuel, trying to help you out, but you don't need the help at that point. Acceleration enrichment, baseline setting, can be plus or minus for more or less fuel. This is basically your accelerator pump for those of us who have tuned a lot of carburetors. And then the next 4 or 5 parameters here are basically the length of time that the LH will continue to add fuel after a throttle transient. In other words, you open the throttle quickly, it'll dump in some extra fuel, and these parameters will let you play with that. The default values are generally quite good for stock intakes. Idle speed, 675 RPM is the stock number for S4s, 775 for GTs. And this is, last box over here, disable idle speed controller, is a diagnostic tool we'll show you in a bit for checking out ISV problems. Okay, that's our fuel parameter page.